When did you realize your safe harbor was actually a shipwreck? I just found out my fiancé, who is 15 years older than me, has been systematically stealing from me for the entirety of our engagement and also has a whole other hidden life. And honestly, I'm currently sitting on the floor of my sister's apartment closet because I can't stop shaking and I don't want her to hear me ugly crying. I don't even know where to start with this dumpster fire, but I need to type it out because I will literally explode if I keep it inside. Please tell me I'm not crazy. I know the age gap sounds bad right away, Michelle, 20F and David, 35M. Yes, David Brooks is 15 years older. Yes, I was 19 when we met. Yes, past me was an idiot, but he was my college professor. Not my professor, thank God, but a history professor in the department next to mine. He had that whole charming, older, put-together vibe. Drove a pristine, new-looking 2021 BMW 5 Series, which is important later, trust me, and always wore perfect tweed jackets. He was established. He seemed secure. And NGL being with him felt like a safe harbor after a truly terrible 18 months of college drama. We've been together for 2 years and 8 months. We got engaged 5 months ago. Everything was going mostly fine. He was always super meticulous about planning, which I admired. Was the kind of person who uses PTO hours exactly correctly and schedules every single bill payment for the year on January 1st. He was the quintessential teacher's pet, academically and socially. That's what I called him affectionately, teacher's pet, because he was always right. Always the best student, the most prepared colleague. The problem is, David is also incredibly conflict avoidant, but in a specific, passive-aggressive way. He hated any kind of emotional intensity. If I cried, he would literally leave the room. If I needed to talk about something deep or stressful, he would switch on Disney Plus and put on Mona. I know, red flag. I rationalized it as him being sensitive. And I, Michelle, am also conflict avoidant, so we basically had the most emotionally repressed relationship in North America. We just swept everything under the rug, and the rug got very lumpy over time. This whole nightmare started last Tuesday at 11:47 a.m. I was scrolling TikTok on my break at the accounting firm. I am an intern, obviously, I'm 20, when I got a notification that David had sent me a Zelle request for $1,247. Now, our rent is $2,495 for our apartment 3B. We split it exactly down the middle, $1,247.50 each. We both have autopay set up. It always goes out on the 1st of the month. Today was the 14th. I texted him immediately, "Hey babe, what's the Zelle for? Did autopay fail?" He texted back almost instantly, which was weird because he's usually in a departmental meeting labyrinth on Tuesdays. "Yes, it failed. I covered your half, just pay me back ASAP." I was like, okay, weird, but whatever. Zelled him the $1,247 and went back to my spreadsheet, feeling a little flutter of anxiety because, even though I have decent savings, that hit right before payday stings. My iPhone 14 battery was at 13%, and I had 47 unopened notifications. I hate my phone. 2 days later, Thursday, I was at the coffee shop on Main Street grabbing a terrible gas station coffee replacement because David had forgotten to buy Starbucks pods. While I was waiting for my mediocre latte, I ran into Brian Gallagher, 31M. Brian is the new English professor. He's gorgeous, like aggressively charismatic. Think perfect messy hair, slightly scruffy beard, and the kind of eyes that actually listen when you talk. He only started last semester, but everyone knows him. He's the opposite of David, loud, funny, prone to wearing ripped jeans to faculty meetings. Total newcomer energy. Brian was holding a huge stack of books and looking stressed. "Michelle, right? David's fiancé?" he asked, smiling. That smile could melt Talenti gelato. "The one and only," I said. "You look like you need a nap, Brian. Tell me about it, grading 101 papers. Say, I meant to ask David this, but I keep missing him in the hall. You guys still in apartment 3B, right?" "Yup, why?" "Oh, just curious." He said he was having some trouble with the lease and moving, but I didn't get all the details. "I'm moving into the complex next month, apartment 4A, and I wondered if he had any tips about the landlord." My stomach dropped a little. "Moving? What are you talking about?" Brian paused, looking genuinely confused. "Oh, I guess he hadn't told you yet. Sorry, I just assumed since he's been talking about selling the lease, he's moving out of the complex, right? Something about needing to downsize since his brother moved back east." I felt my hands start shaking, gripping the lukewarm latte cup. No, we aren't moving. We just renewed the 12-month lease in January. We are getting married in 6 months. Brian, are you sure he said moving?" Brian's eyes widened, and he immediately realized he stepped in something foul. Wow, I am so sorry. I must have misunderstood. I really shouldn't have said anything. Please forget I said that. It was probably just faculty gossip, you know how they blow things out of proportion. He stammered. What am I saying?" I forced a brittle smile. "It's okay, faculty gossip is insane. Probably just about that terrible plumbing issue we had last month. The $85 plumber charge alone was enough to make us want to move, LOL. He gave me a look that screamed, "I know I messed up." He quickly paid for his drink and mumbled, "See you around, Michelle. Grats on the wedding planning," and he bolted. I stood there feeling dizzy. Moving, David had been obsessed with our little 3B apartment. It was equidistant from both our jobs and right next to a Trader Joe's. We spent weeks picking out the IKEA furniture. We even named our Ring doorbell system Harold. Why would he be talking about moving, especially to a newcomer and not to me? I tried calling David 27 times in the next hour. He never picked up. Sent a text. "Super tied up in meetings today. We'll call tonight. Don't worry about the rent thing, all good. Love you. Don't worry about the rent thing." But I had worried about the rent thing, which is why I zelled him $1,247. If everything was all good, why the sudden Zelle request? The math wasn't mathing, you know? That evening, David finally came home at 8 p.m. He was wearing the tweed jacket and looked immaculate, but maybe a little too cheerful. "Hey baby, sorry about the phone silence. Total nightmare day. One of my students almost failed their final history project," he said, kissing me quickly on the cheek. I watched him drop his briefcase. I was trying to keep my voice even, channeling my inner conflict avoidant self, but my throat was tight. Hey, so I ran into Brian Gallagher today at the coffee shop. I began casually, leaning against the counter, picking at a rogue Cheeto I found under the microwave. David froze. Was suddenly overly interested in the contents of the fridge, specifically the Talenti gelato container. Oh yeah, Brian, new guy, nice fella, David mumbled, pulling out the pint. What did he say? He asked if we were still in 3B. He mentioned something about you needing to downsize because of your brother, and that you were trying to sell the remainder of the lease. David slammed the freezer door shut. He didn't look at me. The sudden noise made me jump. That idiot? Seriously. Ryan is a complete gossip, Michelle. I was talking about my parents' lease. They're thinking of selling their place in Westfield. I mentioned it to Brian because he's from the East Coast too, and he offered advice. He turned, putting on his best professor face, calm, stern, slightly condescending. He misunderstood. You know how these things go. People take 2 words and create a whole saga. Please don't worry about nonsense office gossip. Are you hungry? Want me to order Chipotle? I felt instantly foolish. Of course, his parents. Why would David, the master planner, not tell me we were moving? He wouldn't. I was being dramatic. I was too sensitive. Okay, sorry, my bad, I said, instantly apologizing for daring to ask a question. Past me was such an idiot. But why did you Zelle request the rent from me? Oh, that was a mistake, sweetie. I accidentally sent it to you instead of Venmoing my brother for that Costco trip we did last week. Forgot I changed the default. It's fine. I already paid the rent. You can use that $1,247 for something fun. Go buy that ridiculous $347 Dyson knockoff vacuum you keep looking at on Amazon. He was using a manipulation tactic distract with generosity. After all I've done for you, don't question me. I decided to drop it. My conflict avoidance was screaming at me to just enjoy the fact I suddenly had $1,247 free. We ordered Chick-fil-A, watched Netflix, and the issue vanished into the night. But here's the thing about a lie, it leaves a nasty residue. The next morning, Friday, I was getting ready for work and David was in the bathroom. He had left his beat-up Toyota Corolla parked in our usual spot. He only drives the BMW for faculty events or first dates apparently, which is weird, and I needed to get out. I grabbed his keys off the counter to move the Toyota so I could back out my 2018 Honda Civic. I noticed his keychain. It was bulky, and hanging off it was an old-school key card, like for an office building or a gated community. Hey, what's this key card for? I yelled toward the bathroom. I told Jim, I keep forgetting to give it back. Just leave it. He yelled back, slightly too fast. I dropped the keys back on the counter, but the little seed of doubt Brian planted had taken root. I got to work, but I couldn't focus. I had 8 Zoom meetings scheduled, and my inbox was at 247, but all I could think about was that $1,247 payment and the moving story. David is a meticulous accountant, almost to a fault. He wouldn't accidentally Zelle me the exact half-rent amount. He wouldn't. So I did the thing you should never do, but the thing I absolutely had to do. I opened the Zelle app on my phone and clicked on the transaction history. David Brooks, $1,247 paid to him on the 14th. Then I looked at the transaction that showed his payment for rent. There wasn't one. If it hadn't paid the $1,247.50 rent on the 1st of the month. He had paid $1,247.50 on the 14th, about 2 hours after I Zelled him $1,247. He hadn't covered my half. He hadn't paid it at all until I gave him the money, and he only paid his half. I scrolled through the payment history looking for his payment to the landlord. It was there marked as $1,247.50. I scrolled up a little higher, checking for my usual automated payment. It was missing. Our landlord's name is Martha. I looked at the sent to name on David's payment. It was not Martha. It was David Brooks. I stared at my phone, trying to breathe. My chest felt tight. My vision was blurry. My ears started ringing. David hadn't paid the landlord. He'd sent himself $1,247.50. Then he asked me for $1,247. Then, using my money, he paid his own half of the rent. But wait, if he paid his own half, where was my half? Our rent is $2,495. I had given him $1,247. He had paid $1,247.50 to himself. Where was the rest of the money? I immediately called my friend Jess, 20F, who has zero filter, love her. Jess, I need you to tell me I'm not crazy, I whispered into the phone from the supply closet at work. I explained the Zelle transactions, the weird moving comment, the keys. Jess was silent for a terrifying beat. Girl, what the fuck? He stole your rent money and used it to pay his own rent? Wait, but where's the other half, Michelle? Rent is $2,495. If he paid $1,247.50, you're still short half of the rent, plus the 50 cents missing from his payment. I don't know, maybe he paid the 50 cents in pennies, I don't know. I was starting to hyperventilate. The math isn't mathing, boo. Did you check his bank account? No, I don't have access to his bank account. He's always been super secretive about money. We're getting married, but he manages all the finances. I know, past me was a clown. Well, you need to find out where that other half is. And Michelle, you need to check if he actually paid the rent to Martha. I hung up feeling sick. I couldn't concentrate. I used 2 of my sick days and bolted from the office. I drove straight back to our apartment. I was shaking so violently I almost sideswiped a beat-up Toyota Corolla, ironically, on the freeway. I had to get answers. Had to look at the paper trail. David kept all the important documents in a little fireproof safe in the back of his closet. He had shown me the code once, drunkenly, during our first year together, and I had filed it away in my memory. 12:15. I threw open the closet door. I dragged out the safe. My hands were slick with sweat. I typed 1215. It clicked open. Inside, there were tax forms, the titles for the BMW and the Toyota, our passports, and the lease. Grabbed the apartment lease. January 1st renewal for 12 months. Signed by me and signed by David. Everything looked correct. Then I grabbed the rent payment receipts. He had a meticulous stack of receipts printed out monthly from the landlord's online portal. I flipped back to January, paid February, paid March, paid April, paid May, paid, then June 1st. The receipt was there, but the total was only $1,247.50. Note on the bottom in red ink said, partial payment received, remaining balance of $1,247.50 outstanding. Due immediately. My half was never paid. He had been stealing my half of the rent for 6 months. Wait, the Zelle request was for $1,247. He had me pay the current month's overdue rent, but only his half, claiming autopay failed. If he only paid his half, why was the June receipt marked as partial payment received with exactly half outstanding? I looked closer at the receipts from the previous months. January, February, March, April, May, all $2,495 paid. I ran to my computer and logged into the landlord portal. It took me 3 tries to reset the password, but I finally got in. June's statement showed an outstanding balance of $1,247.50, but then I looked at the payment history before June. January 1st, $2,495 paid. February 1st, $2,495 paid. March 1st, $2,495 paid. April 1st, $1,247.50 paid. May 1st, $1,247.50 paid. The landlord portal indicated we had been short $1,247.50 for 2 months already. David had been stealing my half of the rent since April. That's $1,247.50 times 3 months, April, May, June. That is $3,742.50. I wanted to throw up. I stumbled into the bathroom, but nothing came up, just dry heaves and panic. I sat back down by the safe, breathing through the panic. Why? Why would he risk our entire financial life over $1,247 a month? He was a professor. He made good money. I started tearing through the rest of the safe. Under the lease, I found a stack of official-looking papers from a clinic I didn't recognize. David has always been extremely secretive about his health. He goes to a different city for his doctor appointments and tells me nothing. Conflict avoidance, remember? If I brought it up, he'd say, "You're being dramatic, I just have a cold." These papers were from the oncology department at a hospital 40 miles away. The first page I saw made my heart stop. It was a summary of care, dated 2 weeks ago. Diagnosis was listed right there in bold, clinical language. Glioblastoma multiforme, stage IV. I didn't know what that meant, but multiforme and stage IV did not sound like a cold. I grabbed my iPhone, screen slightly cracked from when I dropped it at Target last week, and frantically typed in the term. Glioblastoma, highly aggressive brain cancer. Life expectancy, 12-18 months with treatment. Inoperable, terminal. I look back at the summary. Had been diagnosed 8 months ago, right around the time he proposed. Treatment started 6 months ago, right when he started shorting the rent. I felt a wave of crushing grief and rage hit me simultaneously. The grief was for him, he was dying. The rage was for me, he had been lying about everything for almost a year, letting me plan a wedding while he was dealing with this. And not only that, he was stealing from me to pay for God knows what treatments. I flipped through the receipts for his treatment. Bills were astronomical. One specific chemotherapy drug was billed at $3,470 for a single infusion. His health insurance was clearly terrible. I suddenly understood the missing rent money. He was dying and he was broke. He was stealing from me to pay for treatments, hoping I wouldn't notice until it was too late. He was essentially liquidating our future, but it was my money he was taking. The teacher's pet wasn't perfect. He was sick. He was a thief. I picked up the key card I had seen earlier. It wasn't an old gym card. It had a logo, the Reserve at Sterling Gate, a gated community, miles from our apartment. I grabbed the titles for his cars. I looked at the BMW title. It was not in David's name. It was leased by the university for faculty transport and recruitment. He didn't even own the car he drove around pretending to be rich in, the Toyota Corolla. It was actually his, and the title was listed under a different address, the address for the Reserve at Sterling Gate. My brain was running at 1,000 mph. Why does David, who lives with me in apartment 3B, own a car registered at a different, expensive-sounding gated community? Then I saw a small stack of papers tucked behind his passport. They looked like mortgage documents. I pulled them out. David Brooks, 35M property address. The Reserve at Sterling Gate, Unit 4B owner, David Brooks. And under the owner's name, something else was scrawled, partially blocked by a sticky note but still readable. Joint ownership, wife v. wife. My legs went weak. I felt the ugly crying building. I picked up the stack of papers and ran. I didn't grab anything else. I ran out the door, jumped in my Civic, and drove straight to my sister's place. My sister, Sarah 30F, was making a Sad Girl Hours playlist on Spotify and eating Ben & Jerry's when I burst into her apartment, mascara running down my face. "Oh my God, what happened, Michelle?" I word vomited everything. Brian's comment, the Zelle request, the 3 months of missing rent, the safe, the diagnosis, and the mortgage papers showing a wife. Sarah was instantly pure rage. "I'm coming over right now. We're going to slash his tires and burn his tweed jackets." Audacity, he's dying, and he's been gaslighting you and stealing from you to pay his bills while he keeps an entire secret life. That is pure sociopathic teacher's pet energy. "No, I can't go back," I said, still shaking. "I need a minute. I need to process the fact that my fiancé is dying and also married to someone else named V, who lives in a fancy gated community. I have $3,742.50 worth of rent debt and a wedding to cancel." Okay, hide in the closet. I'll get you some Talenti gelato," Sarah said, immediately going into protective mode. I ended up here in her closet on the phone with Jess, who was furiously searching the university faculty website. Okay, Michelle, get this. David Brooks is listed as married on his HR forms. His wife's name is Vanessa, 35F. She's a dermatologist. They've been married for 5 years last June. Vanessa. The picture clicked into horrifying focus. David wasn't just shorting the rent because he was sick. He was maintaining 2 separate lives. He needed money to pay the mortgage on his actual home with his actual wife, while living half-time with me and having me pay half the rent on our love nest to keep up the facade while he was dealing with a terminal illness. He was literally running a scam on me and using my conflict avoidance against me. Jess was whispering now. Wait, Vanessa Brooks has an Instagram. She posted 5 days ago. Guess what? It was a picture of a diamond engagement ring. My stomach flipped. What? He proposed to her too, while HES dying? No, idiot. He's been married to her for 5 years. She's the one who is alive and well. She posted a picture of her hand holding a champagne flute. The caption says, "So excited for our engagement party next Saturday. 6 years together, finally getting official. Love you, D. 6 years together." David and I have only been together for 2 years and 8 months. He was proposing to his wife again or having an engagement party celebrating their original one or something while simultaneously engaged to me. And that party, next Saturday. That was tomorrow. I looked at the date on the post again. Engagement party next Saturday. It was Friday night now. The party was tomorrow. I felt a new emotion rising above the grief and the shock and the financial terror. It's pure, unadulterated black hole rage. The kind of rage that wants to key a BMW even if it's leased and then pour gasoline over the entire facade. I texted David. I know I shouldn't have, but I couldn't help it. Hey, are you going to be busy tomorrow night? I saw the read receipt pop up instantly. He was probably watching Hulu and waiting for me to call him. David. Oh, just a small dinner party with the department, baby. You know, faculty stuff, I might be late. Was taking me the side piece, the girl who paid his rent off the board so he could be with his actual wife at their engagement party. I was done. Just done. I was 20 years old, $3,742.50 in debt to a landlord, and had just discovered my 35-year-old terminally ill fiancé was also married and actively lying about a whole other life. This was not just a wedding disaster. This was a whole life implosion. I texted Jess back. I need you to send me the address of that gated community. Jess, Michelle, what are you going to do? Don't go there. Wait until Monday. Call the police, call his wife. Me. He wants to have an engagement party tomorrow? Fine. I think it's time I met Vanessa, 35F, and offered her a second opinion on the state of her fiancé. I put the phone on silent and sat back, looking at the mortgage documents. Brian Gallagher had given me the final piece of the puzzle, the move. David wasn't trying to sell our lease because of downsizing. He was trying to get me out of the apartment before he died, so Vanessa wouldn't have to deal with me, the mistress, squatting in their expensive complex. I looked at the date of the engagement party, tomorrow, 5:30 p.m. I grabbed the key card to the reserve at Sterling Gate. I knew exactly where I was going. My conflict avoidance was officially dead. I had a $3,742.50 reason to cause a scene, and a brain tumor diagnosis that told me my window for revenge was closing fast. I stood up in the closet. My heart was racing, but I wasn't shaking anymore. I was wired. I needed to see the look on David's teacher's pet face when I walked into that party. I wanted to see Vanessa's expression when I handed her the printout of the glioblastoma diagnosis and the evidence of the missing rent money right in the middle of her celebration. I had no idea what I was walking into or what Vanessa would be like. Was she in on the scam? Did she know about me? Probably not, given the sheer audacity of David's life maintenance. But I was going to find out, and I was going to ruin that party. That was the only thing I was certain of. Sarah knocked on the closet door. Michelle, I'm ordering pizza. Want Olive Garden or something else? And please, what are you going to wear tomorrow? You need to look hot if you're going to expose him. I looked down at my stained sweatshirt. I don't know, Sarah, but David is having an engagement party tomorrow, and I'm going to need a really good dress for the final confrontation. I felt the corners of my mouth turn up in a terrible, cold smile. It was petty, toxic, and probably illegal, but it was all I had left. The revenge approach was taking over. I was going to expose the whole lie right there in front of all his faculty friends and his unwitting wife. But first, I needed to make sure I had my supporting documents ready. I had the key card. I had the glioblastoma diagnosis. I had the missing rent receipts. I just needed to figure out if David knew the apartment complex gate code had changed 2 weeks ago. If he didn't, I could wait for him to leave for the party and then completely empty out apartment 3B before he got back. I had a sudden thought. David's BMW, the leased one. Where was he keeping it registered now that he wasn't driving it every day? I ran back to the safe's contents in my mind, remembering the titles. The BMW was university leased, but the title had listed the university parking garage location. If David thought he was so clever, keeping his 2 lives separate, I was about to prove him wrong. I checked the Zelle transaction history one last time. Wait, the $1,247.50 he sent to himself. What was the purpose? I looked at the notes on the internal transaction. It wasn't rent. It wasn't transfer. It was a single, terrifying word. Deposit. Deposit for what? I was about to find out tomorrow at the engagement party. I'm currently terrified and also incredibly excited. Pray for me. I was still sitting in Sarah's closet when she brought me the Talenti Midnight Mint. It was the only thing that felt safe in the world. I had 3 hours of terrible, shallow sleep on a pile of designer clothes that cost more than my rent debt, which is saying something because my rent debt is $3,742.50. Spent the rest of Friday night and all of Saturday morning formulating the plan, which NGL was mostly me pacing Sarah's tiny living room yelling the audacity every 5 minutes. Sarah was amazing. She immediately pivoted from rage to logistics. First, she said, scrolling through her iPad, we need to secure the assets. That 2018 Honda Civic is the only thing you own free and clear. You are not going back to 3B until David is permanently gone. You are staying here. My stuff? My expensive Dyson knockoff vacuum that I didn't buy because David stole the money? I wailed. It's gone, Michelle. Assume it's all gone for now, but we have bigger fish to fry. We need the outfit and the packet. The packet. The revenge petty packet is what Jess called it. Item 1, the diagnosis. We printed 2 copies of the glioblastoma multiforme, stage IV, summary of care. One for Vanessa, one for me to keep as a reminder of why I needed to run, not walk, away from this mess. Item 2, the proof of theft. Screenshots of the Zelle transaction history. David requesting $1,247 from me on the 14th. David paying himself $1,247.50 on the 14th. The landlord portal showing the missing April, May, and June payments. He highlighted the sent to David Brooks line in fluorescent pink marker. Item 3, the deposit. This was the one that still bugged me. That $1,247.50 he sent to himself had the memo. Deposit. I had to know what it was for. Jess, who is a genius with social media snooping, somehow found Vanessa's Yelp page for her dermatology practice. On the main page, there was a link to her secondary practice, Aesthetic Wellness and Bridal Prep Clinic. Jess texted me a screenshot. Check out the services, Michelle. I clicked it. Under injectables and fillers was the standard pricing. But under event packages, there was one specific option, the Diamond Deposit. Secure your pre-wedding treatments and bridal suite. Cost $1,247.50. My stomach churned. Stole my half of the rent, the money that was keeping a roof over my head, and used it to pay for his wife's engagement party preparation package. It wasn't just shorting the rent because he was broke and sick. It was actually paying for his other life with my money while knowingly leaving me in debt. That made the cancer diagnosis feel less tragic and more like a tool of sociopathy. Sarah looked at the printout and just shook her head slowly. He is pure evil, Michelle. Pure evil. Brian Factor. I hadn't forgotten Brian Gallagher, 31M, the charismatic newcomer. He was the one who broke the facade. David clearly hated him, probably because Brian wasn't conflict avoidant and was aggressively attractive. I texted Brian at 1:00 p.m. Saturday. My hands were shaking too much to type, so I used voice to text, which was hilarious because it kept interpreting my distress as singing. Me? Hey Brian, it's Michelle Shaw. I need to talk to you ASAP about David. You were right about everything you said. The moving, the lease, everything. I know it's weird, but I need a huge favor. I think you might be invited to David's engagement party tonight. I need to know the location. Brian responded instantly. Brian, wow, Michelle, I knew I smelled something off. I'm so sorry. Yes, I was invited. Mandatory faculty attendance apparently. It's at the Reserve at Sterling Gate, the HOA clubhouse, 5:30 p.m. Why? Wait, you're coming, aren't you? Please tell me you're not going to slash his tires. Me. I might consider the tires, but first I need a word with his wife, Vanessa. Can you be ready to provide a small, brief distraction at 5:45 p.m.? Brian, consider it done. I'm bringing a date just to have someone to hold my beer while I watch the fireworks. NGL, I hate that guy. Teacher's pet deserves this. Send me the plan. I laid out the plan. I walk in at 5:45 p.m., exactly 15 minutes into the cocktail hour. Brian creates chaos near the punch bowl, maybe spill something, start a loud, embarrassing political debate with a junior professor, whatever. While everyone is distracted, I walk straight to Vanessa, hand her the packet, and walk out. It was beautifully simple, and Sarah kept saying it was terrible and I was going to jail, but I didn't care. Logistics of revenge. Sarah insisted I wear the black silk slip dress she bought for a bachelorette trip she never took. It was extremely flattering and made me feel 10% less like a sobbing college intern with $3,700 in rent debt. By 4:00 p.m. I was ready. I practiced my I'm not hysterical, I am professionally aggrieved face in the mirror. Just before I left, Sarah asked, what about the actual theft? Are you calling the police? No, I said, putting the revenge packet into a sleek clutch. He's dying, Sarah. I can't send a terminally ill man to jail. That's too much baggage for my 20-year-old conscience. But I can expose his entire existence and ensure his last few months are financially and socially miserable. That's revenge petty. It's the highest form of justice. I grabbed the keycard. 5:00 p.m. The drive, the Reserve at Sterling Gate, was exactly as pretentious as it sounded. Manicured lawns, fountains, and massive faux Tuscan homes. David's actual life was a soap opera set. I pulled up to the gate. I slid the keycard into the machine. Nothing happened. I tried again. Beep. Error. I leaned on the horn, feeling panic rise. The keycard was useless. My entire plan hinged on silent, dramatic entry. Then I remembered David's teacher's pet need to be perfect. He would never take a risk. Keycard probably belonged to Vanessa, and she probably changed the code after they got engaged again, so David wouldn't accidentally share it with me. But the paper? The mortgage documents listed Unit 4B. I saw a small keypad next to the slot for the keycard. I typed in the only code I knew that was important to David. 1215, the safe code. Beep. Access granted. I drove through the gate, feeling a terrifying mix of exhilaration and doom. I found the clubhouse. It was a sprawling building that looked like a country club had violently mated with a bank. The university's leased BMW 5 Series was parked front and center, naturally. 5:40 p.m., entry. I walked through the double doors. The space was filled with about 50 people, all looking sophisticated and well-fed. Lots of tweed, lots of tasteful diamond jewelry. I recognized 2 of David's colleagues immediately. David was there too, standing next to a stunning woman in a pale blue designer dress. Vanessa, 35F. She was beautiful, poised, and looked like someone who definitely paid $1,247.50 for pre-wedding fillers. They were both glowing, holding champagne flutes, doing the whole "we're so in love" routine. David looked perfectly healthy, impeccably dressed. No sign of a debilitating tumor, just the classic teacher's pet smirk. I spotted Brian Gallagher by the buffet table, already looking stressed but determined. He gave me a quick, frantic head nod. I walked over to the nearest waiter and grabbed a glass of champagne. I needed the liquid courage. 5:44 p.m. The distraction. Brian looked at his watch, took a massive swig of punch, and then, God bless him, he launched his entire body weight into a table laden with expensive hors d'oeuvres. The noise was deafening. Crash. Plates shattered. Tiny shrimp cocktails scattered across the white carpet. Oh my God, Brian yelled in a perfect, high-pitched imitation of an overly dramatic faculty member. I told Professor Harrison not to leave the physics department's laser pointer here. It was clearly overloaded. I am so sorry, everyone. Everyone immediately turned. David's face snapped around, irritation warring with shock. This was my moment. I walked straight toward David and Vanessa. My legs felt like jelly, but I kept walking. David saw me. His champagne flute stopped halfway to his mouth. The teacher's pet mask cracked, replaced by sheer, blinding panic. His eyes went wide and he muttered, "Michelle, what the hell?" Vanessa turned, smiling politely, assuming I was some junior faculty member's date. "Oh, hello, are you with the English department? I'm Vanessa, David's fiancée." I stopped directly in front of them. My voice came out unnervingly calm. "Hello, Vanessa, I am Michelle. I'm also David's fiancée." The air pressure in the room seemed to drop. People were still cleaning up Brian's mess, but several conversations near us had died instantly. Vanessa blinked, processing. She laughed nervously, a bright, artificial sound. "That's a funny joke, dear. You must be confusing him with another David." "No, I am not," I said, holding out the packet. "We've been engaged for 5 months. Live together in apartment 3B, which, by the way, David has shorted the rent on for the last 3 months, totaling $3,742.50, which I assume went toward your bridal prep deposit." I dropped the entire Revenge Petty packet right into her perfectly manicured hand. David finally moved, grabbing my arm, his panic turning to rage. "Michelle, stop it. You are being hysterical. Go home now." I yanked my arm back. "Not hysterical, David. I'm debt-ridden and humiliated because you are a terrible liar." Vanessa, bless her heart, was already flipping through the papers. She saw the Zell statements first. Her perfect dermatologist face went white. "David, what is this?" Her voice was low and dangerous. Before David could deploy his passive-aggressive escape tactics, I leaned in toward Vanessa. "I think you need to look at the second page, Vanessa," I said sweetly. She saw the glioblastoma diagnosis. Was silent, completely, utterly silent. Even Brian had stopped apologizing for the laser pointer incident. Vanessa looked at the terminal cancer diagnosis, then back up at David. She didn't look sad. She looked furious. "Glioblastoma, stage 4, she whispered, her voice shaking slightly. "You told me it was just a recurring migraine. You had me planning a 4-day honeymoon in the Maldives, David." David looked utterly defeated. The teacher's pet had failed the final exam. It looked like he was about to cry, which of course was his patented move to avoid confrontation. "Vanessa, I can explain. It's complicated. I didn't want to worry you, and Michelle is... I am the 20-year-old idiot you convinced to pay your bills while you were managing 2 fraudulent lives and dying." I finished for him. "And you know what the worst part is, David? You used my conflict avoidance against me. You knew I wouldn't ask questions. You knew I'd be too afraid to check the receipts." I felt the burning rage finally turn into a weird, numb release. I had said the worst of it. Vanessa was still gripping the papers, scanning the BMW lease title showing university ownership. "You don't even own the car, David. I thought we were financially secure." "We are financially secure, Vanessa. The 4B mortgage is nearly paid off. We just need liquidity for the treatments," David practically shouted. "Liquidity from stealing a college intern's rent money." Vanessa asked, her voice dripping with disgust. She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. There was recognition, pity, and intense female solidarity in her eyes. "Michelle, did you know?" Vanessa asked me. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I found out yesterday. I'm sorry you found out this way, but I had to know where my rent money went." She nodded once sharply. She didn't blame me. TBH, that was the biggest surprise of the night. "I need air," Vanessa announced to the room, dropping the packet onto the floor like it was a biohazard. "If anyone needs a dermatologist, I will be closed for the foreseeable future while I hire a divorce attorney and probably a financial crimes investigator. David, you and your little intern need to leave my party." David stood there, frozen. I knew he was calculating which lie to deploy next, which Disney movie to suggest to diffuse the tension. "Keycard code," I whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. 1215. "You should change that, Vanessa. It's the code for the safe where David keeps all his secrets." I turned, walked straight past Brian, who gave me a horrified thumbs up and strode out of the clubhouse. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked to my Civic, got in, and drove away. 6:30 p.m., the aftermath, the crash, I drove back to Sarah's place in a fugue state. When I got there, Sarah was already in the kitchen, making tea and looking terrified. "What happened? Did you get arrested? Did you cry? Did Vanessa scream?" "No," I said, collapsing onto the couch. "It was quiet. Vanessa is divorcing him and also possibly pressing charges. I think I broke him, Sarah, and he's dying." The crash hit me hard. The adrenaline wore off and the reality of the diagnosis returned. Yes, he was a manipulative thief who had ruined my credit and lied to me for a year. But he was still a human being facing a terminal diagnosis, and I had just publicly humiliated him in front of his entire professional network and his wife. I ugly cried for about 3 hours straight. Not just about the theft, but about the loss of the future I thought I had, and the sickening realization that David's sickness had been used as a weapon against me. As called, practically vibrating with excitement. Brian just texted me. Apparently, David's boss, Dean Harrington, showed up right after you left and started screaming at David about the leased BMW. Apparently, the university was not aware the car was being registered at 2 separate addresses. It was amazing. The party devolved into a faculty meeting about ethical misconduct. NGL, Brian said it was better than the season finale of Succession. "That's good," I mumbled into a pillow. The teacher's pet is finally expelled. Sunday, the boring reality. The next day, the logistics started. This is the messy part nobody talks about after a huge dramatic confrontation. 1. The landlord. I called Martha, our landlord. I was crying and apologizing before I even got the words out. Explained everything. David stole the rent, I was misled, and I was going to pay the $3,742.50 immediately, even if it meant wiping out my entire savings. Martha was surprisingly gentle. Michelle, I know David Brooks. I thought it was strange when he started making the payments from a different account. I've dealt with this before. You are not responsible for the full debt right now, but you need to move out immediately. If he's married, his wife should be contacted about the remaining debt as they're co-liable. I'll waive the late fees, but you have until the 30th to vacate. The clock was ticking. I had 16 days to get my life out of 3B2. The move, I couldn't face David. Sarah and Jess were absolute angels. They rented a U-Haul on Monday and we went to 3B while David was presumably in damage control mode with Vanessa and his dean. When we got to 3B, David's Toyota Corolla was gone. The apartment looked exactly the same, but the fireproof safe was missing from the closet. I didn't feel anything. I just started packing. I took my clothes, my books, my specific mugs. I left behind the shared IKEA furniture and the Ring doorbell herald for David and Vanessa to fight over. I found a note on the kitchen counter, written in David's perfect, neat professor handwriting. It read, Michelle, I am deeply sorry. I truly loved you. I was desperate and sick. I transferred $5,000 to your savings account this morning. Use it for the debt and the move. Goodbye. I stared at the note and the Zelle notification that had popped up while I was driving over. $5,000. It wasn't an apology. It was a payoff. And it was enough to cover the $3,742.50 and leave me with a small cushion. I realized something awful. David wasn't just sick. He was calculating until the very end. Knew the exposure meant the end of his relationship with Vanessa, and he probably knew she would go after his finances, which were substantial due to the nearly paid-off mortgage. He tossed me $5K to buy my silence and avoid the stress of dealing with my rent debt on top of the divorce proceedings and the professional fallout. He still thought money could fix emotional devastation. I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. I screenshotted the Zelle transfer and sent it to Jess. Jess, he bought you off. Still petty, still a teacher's pet. Me, at least I'm not in debt anymore. I'm taking the money, but I'm not forgiving him. 3. Brian Gallagher, unexpected ally Brian called me Tuesday, just as I was stress eating an entire sleeve of Oreos. Hey Michelle, look, David officially filed for a medical leave of absence today. Dean Harrington is furious. He's going through his university accounts. I don't know the full extent, but it sounds like David was running a pretty complicated system of fraud beyond just the rent. He was claiming research grants and redirecting funds. Oh my God, I said. He was a criminal genius on his deathbed. Yeah, basically. Anyway, listen, I'm moving into 4A next month, remember? But I still have my old apartment lease until the end of the semester. It's tiny, but it's cheap and it's month to month. Do you need a place? It's in a decent neighborhood close to your internship. I stared at the wall. An instant, safe place to land. It was exactly what I needed. Brian, are you serious? Yes, I need that desperately. Great. I'll send you the paperwork. Don't worry about the deposit. I'll cover it. Just pay me the first month's rent. Consider it collateral damage payment for having to spend a year watching the teacher's pet walk around like he owned the world. Brian Gallagher, the charismatic newcomer, was suddenly my financial savior. It was weird. A week later, the new normal I am typing this from my new apartment. It's small, smells slightly of curry, and has a window facing a brick wall, but it is mine. No ghosts of lies, no tweed jackets, no Talenti gelato drama. I blocked David on everything. I even changed my work email password, just in case. My friends are amazing. Sarah helped me set up the utilities. Jess came over and helped me organize my financial documents. I decided not to press criminal charges regarding the theft. He's dying, and the public humiliation and the divorce from Vanessa are enough. That's my version of justice. The petty satisfaction of knowing he lost his wife, his job, and his reputation in one night, all over a lie he was desperate to maintain. I got one final text from Vanessa's lawyer, a formal cease and desist letter warning me not to contact David or Vanessa, but also noting that the $5,000 transfer was considered settlement for the accrued rent debt, and that I was released from any further liability on the 3B lease. Sweet. The difficult diagnosis, glioblastoma stage IV, makes the revenge feel complicated. There are moments when I feel immense guilt. I was planning to expose him anyway for the fraud and the bigamy, but knowing he was terminal added a layer of darkness. Was I cruel? Maybe. But David chose to use his remaining time and his illness to manipulate me. My grief over his death will be completely overshadowed by my rage over the betrayal. I went to therapy for the first time on Thursday. I spent 50 minutes talking about how David used my conflict avoidance against me, how he trained me to minimize my own emotions and needs. Therapist told me I was incredibly brave for confronting him, even if the method was dramatic. I realized the only reason I was capable of that confrontation was because the rage finally exceeded the fear. 3 weeks later, the resolution approach. It's been 3 weeks since the engagement party disaster. I went back to the accounting internship. My supervisor noticed I was sharper, angrier, and generally more focused. I'm doing better at work because I realized that being aggressive in spreadsheets is actually a healthy outlet. I ran into Brian Gallagher at the university coffee shop last week. How are things in 3B? He asked, smiling the gorgeous smile that started this whole mess. Quiet, I said. I hear David is officially non-responsive to faculty emails. He is, and Vanessa is officially filing for divorce and has put 4B on the market. Apparently she didn't want to live in a house bought with stolen money, Brian replied. We talked for a while. He's genuine, funny, and NGL intensely kind. He was worried about me, not just about the drama. He also called me out gently for my history of dating older, complicated men. You need stability, Michelle, not a research project, he said. I laughed, the first genuine, unforced laugh I've had in months. I know, I'm done with teacher's pets. He offered to help me unpack my last box of kitchen supplies. I said yes. We didn't talk about David. We talked about terrible student papers and the excessive price of avocados. The financial reality is still tricky. The $5,000 is gone, swallowed by back rent and the moving costs. My credit score took a hit from the partial payments, which is annoying, but I'm working on rebuilding it. I'm eating ramen every night, but I'm sleeping soundly for the first time since I met David. I realized the biggest character development wasn't getting revenge. It was realizing I had the strength to stand up for myself, even when the person I was confronting was terminally ill. My conflict avoidance might not be completely cured, but it's officially been placed on medical leave. I don't know what will happen to David. He's out of my life, which is the only resolution that matters to me. I survived the implosion of the teacher's pet. I'm 20, slightly traumatized, financially recovering, but officially free of a 15-year age gap, a bigamist, a thief, and a tweed jacket fetish. Yesterday, I bought the Dyson knockoff vacuum. It was on sale for $120. I paid for it with my own money, earned entirely honestly, and I smiled the whole way home. Will I date another professor? Absolutely not. Will I ever allow someone else to manage my finances? Never. Anyway, that's the update. I'm going to finish unpacking this brick wall view apartment. Thanks for letting me spill all this chaos. I promise the next time I post, it will be about something much less dramatic. Maybe just a bad roommate story. LOL.